Oh wait, it's doing it. Yay. So should this work correctly, it looks like it's going live on YouTube. So when we're done, if you go to the Cancer Survivorships YouTube channel, which I believe Sam has added like an email to all of you. And also there we go. Okay, I'm gonna close that. Hopefully now as a backup, because we all know how this works with technology, I'm also gonna record this just to make sure. All right. So welcome everyone. I'm Becky Waller. If you haven't met me, I know a lot of you've met me. We've done classes together. So tonight we get to do a little bit of a holiday treats cooking demo. So I'm going to do my best to make this room work as a kitchen so that you guys can see everything that I said. Now, I did send out the recipes with the original Zoom link. I will also send another set of recipes after we're done because I know sometimes things get lost in the emails. So I'll do a follow-up after this so that we can make sure that you guys get everything that you need. So I'm just microwaving one thing really quick. The three things that we want to do tonight, and the whole are doing coconut macaroons. We're going to do some spiced nuts, which you did not get that recipe yet. That's why I'm going to be sending that one later. And we are also doing a salted caramel bonbon, which is delicious. And I think of all the things, if you're like, I can only do one thing, I can't really handle more than that, I would take the time to do the salted caramel bonbons because they're really good. And I think they're a good trick that most people will not guess that it is a healthy option. All right. So starting with our coconut macaroons. Now, if you've ever had these, coconut macaroons have a similar sort of setup. If you look up recipes online, you'll find that they all have sweetened coconut flakes, sweetened condensed milk, some egg whites, some vanilla, so you're seeing a similar thing moving through this. But if we're trying to eat healthier at the holidays, and we want to make sure that we are trying to cut down on the sugar a little bit, make something, be able to incorporate good, healthy foods into our diet, not feel like the whole holiday season is like a cheat. And it can actually be something that's delicious to eat. So with our coconut macaroons, what I did is I wanted to look through several different recipes online and try to find something that will cut down on the extra sugar, especially in that sweetened condensed milk. So the recipe that I sent you or that you will be getting later is actually not using any sweetened condensed milk. It's using natural sweetener with either maple syrup, honey, or if you wanted to, agave nectar. It all depends on your palate and what you like. And that's the whole goal of doing this, is that you're playing a little bit, you're figuring out what you like, how you can make little tweaks so it's something that you want to prepare again. So starting looking at the coconut macaroon recipe, starts with, flaked coconut. Now I bought this, this is Trader Joe's. It's just unsweetened. And that's the big thing. We are going to add sweetness to it. It doesn't have to start with a bunch of sugar on it. Coconut does, it's a fruit. It has some natural sweetness. It's not super, super sweet, but we can play with that. I'll be moving this screen up and down so you can see this. So the one I bought, it's like a little bit of a bigger flake. And when I was playing with the recipe on the weekend, what I found is that if your flake is too big, it will not really hold together really well as a cookie. You have to make sure that you are, getting a finer flake. So if you want to buy something that's already bagged and it's very, very finely shredded, then you could start with that. You just want to make sure it's not sweetened. What I did, so I didn't have to go out and buy another item. I just got my little mini Cuisinart. Looks like this. I already shredded everything up. I threw my whole cup of flaked coconut into it. And then I could turn it into a nice fine shred. And then I could still use the product that I had without it being an issue. So to do this, you're going to mix your shredded coconut. Just throw about a cup in there. And then you can use any type of flour. You need something to bind it together. What I use on the recipe that you're getting is almond flour or almond meal. So with almond flour, it's great because it's not actually a flour. It's really, when you look at the ingredients, it's almonds. That's all there is to it. So it's taking the almonds and it's shredded, it's making them into a nice fine flour type texture so that you can use it in your foods, but you're not getting, let's say you're cooking for somebody who might have some sensitivity to gluten. Maybe you're cutting down on some of the extra carbs and sugar, so you don't want to have too much flour in your recipes. This is a nice option to give you a healthier cookie because you're actually just adding a little bit more protein. You're adding some healthy fats, but you're not actually adding a flour to this at all. A little bit of vanilla extract, about 1/4 teaspoon. Just gonna eyeball it. And then for sweetness, and I put coconut milk in there. A little bit warm. Coconut milk, what you want to look for when you're making this is a light coconut milk. You can find, full fat coconut milk. Light coconut milk is going to be lower in calories. You're going from 130 calories of a coconut cream down to only about 60 calories for 1/3 of a can with the light coconut milk. There's no extra sugars added to it. It just has regular coconut milk and a few things in it to stabilize. Our sweetness is going to be coming from our maple syrup. Now, when I cooked with both honey and maple syrup, and I found that the flavor of the maple syrup in here really was so much better when it paired with the coconut milk. And I used a few taste testers in my family. They agreed. We all like the honey a lot better, maple syrup a lot better. The trick with maple syrup is you have to make sure it's actual real maple syrup. It should say, straight maple syrup. If there's anything else in the ingredients, if you're just going into the regular aisle near the pancakes and cereals and you're grabbing like Aunt Jemima, that's not real maple syrup. That's going to have a bunch of sugars and sweeteners added to it. That's not the one that you want. If you want something a little healthier, it's got some polyphenols in it. It's something that you'd recognize in nature. It's going to add the good sweetness. You don't want to overdo it because anytime you're adding sweetness or sugar, even if it's organic, even if it's natural, you still have to do it in moderation. There's no true freebies in life. So we are cooking this up and we're trying to get it to thicken a little bit. So you're just simmering it. Now, if you were doing a traditional macaron and you were going to use the sweetened condensed milk and you wanted to substitute things out that way, you could do that. And what I will include in my recipes that I send to you later on tonight is how to substitute that out. But I can tell you right now, you'll notice in here it's getting a little bit thicker, a little bubbly. We eventually wanted to get to the texture where you can scoop it into a cookie shape. So you're just allowing it to simmer and get some of the liquid solids out of it and get a little bit more towards that texture. So, a friend, a relative, someone online, you just want to do your coconut macaroons and make sure that you're using the traditional recipe with the shredded coconut, just get the unsweetened. You're going to do the sweetened condensed milk breakdown. So you want to substitute sweetened condensed milk. You're going to start with a can of evaporated non-fat milk. That's it. You don't need any sugar in it. Then you're going to mix in a cup of non-fat dry milk. This is exactly what they say. It's just dehydrated dry milk that's in powder form, kind of like what they used to do, I think, during Depression times, where you could rehydrate it with a little bit of water, mix it up and hope it still tastes nice and creamy. But in recipes where you're going to blend it in, it works really well. It's also something I like to use as an inexpensive alternative when people are doing protein shakes, because this basically is protein. It's a protein powder that has no flavor to it. It's just the dry milk. So you're going to mix this along with your non-fat or your evaporated non-fat milk with the dry milk powder. And then to add sweetness, and that's what we are looking to decrease. If you still want to do some regular sugar, you could, and then you're in control of how much you're putting in. Or like for me, my husband tries to eat low sugar foods because he's diabetic. We tried doing a sugar substitute. Now you always have to go within your comfort zone. If you are totally no artificial sugars, I don't want any of it, that's perfectly fine. Then you just try to cut down the sugar and modify that non-fat dry milk with maybe a little bit of, you know, table sugar. You could try a little maple syrup, and then you're going to add some cornstarch because it needs something to thicken it. That's where you get that nice creamy texture to it. What I used at home when I was playing with the recipe for my husband is erythritol. This is powdered erythritol. This actually, you can see it's white in the bag. It is a sugar alcohol. Now, what makes it a little different than some of the artificial sugars is that when you deal with sugar alcohol, they're digested in your colon, in your intestines. So you're not breaking it down earlier. It's not causing your blood sugar levels to go up. It's not causing insulin levels to go up. So it's really, you know, a little bit better as far as when we're looking at those things. You know, people who are pre-diabetic, diabetic, just trying to cut sugar down. What is different with erythritol from some other, you know, sugar alcohols? You know, if you ever look at sugar-free gum, some sugar-free candies, we'll see sorbitol, mannitol, maltitol. Those are common of sugar alcohols. One complication, because it digests in your intestines, is that if you're eating too much of it, you can get some bloating, some gas, some discomfort, because all of a sudden you have this food that's not totally digestible, which is how it stays low calorie, and you're eating a bunch of it. Let's say you grab that bag of sugar-free gummy worms and didn't think about it as you're popping away at it, working on something, you might feel uncomfortable later. Erythritol, only about 90% of it is not digested. So you generally don't get the same side effect of having any GI symptoms from it. Of any GI symptoms. So it's a little bit better in moderation. So that's my thought. But if you just mix those items together and do not, you know, try to warm it up, they can be a little gritty and separate. So what is helpful is if you simmer the evaporated milk, the milk powder, whatever sweetener you're going to use, and then some cornstarch, and just stir it until it looks a little thicker, then you can cool it down and use it in your recipe. So let's get back to this. You can see that this has gotten thicker with the macaroon. So it's at the point where I can, you know, form it into, like, you know, take a spoon and I'm going to form it into little balls and put it onto a tray. Now, since we are working with a kitchen that does not have a stove right now, it's my makeshift kitchen, I'm going to show you what it ends up looking like. You'll heat your oven. You're going to do the oven about 350. Takes about 15 minutes. And you should be getting these nice little balls that are flat on the bottom. And that would be your macaroon. Now we're setting it aside for a moment because we want to put some chocolate on them and dip them and make them even more delicious. And that's another part with our next piece. So set this aside. We're going to move on to the next recipe. So coconut macaroons will be finished in a moment. So bonbons, salted bonbons, salted caramel bonbons. Now, if I'm going to eat caramel bonbons and I'm going to pick them up at the store, mostly it's going to be sugar and fat. There's not much more when it comes to caramel bonbons. This is taking a healthier twist on it. It's a recipe that I found from a vegan chef who works with a lot of natural ingredients and trying to find ways to use real foods to make other, you know, sweets, make savory foods a little bit more healthy for us. So with that, the main ingredient that we're using is going to be dates. We'll see here. So a date, when you buy them, they're about this big. I mean, I'll be honest, like on the camera, they can look a little bit strange. They might look a little bug-like, but the sweetness in them is something that has made it a very popular item to be using in lots of different foods. You'll notice that there's more natural protein bars and sweets that they're using dates instead of using sugar so that you can get the sweetness from the regular foods. It also adds a nice texture and consistency that makes it easy to work with. That I sent you, the specific one that the vegan chef likes are these Majol dates, which I went to. If you live in the Park Ridge area or Niles, I went over to Tony's and you can find them. They're on the shelf, and for about a 1 pound, 12-ounce container like this, for those dates, it's about $14. Now, if you just Since I don't cook with dates all the time, I don't eat them plain all the time. My knowing the difference between a Majol date and a regular date is about this. So I went for the same size packet that was $3.99 and it's delicious. So you don't have to feel like you have to spend top dollar for it. If there's any recommendations on specific brands, you just go with what works best for you. We definitely don't want to feel like we have something that's, you know, that's very expensive food that's still good. All right, so you're gonna take your dates first because it's a dried fruit. Anytime you're using dried fruits, you wanna make sure you take them, just put them in a little bit of warm water for about 10 minutes. You could do it a little longer. I soaked these ahead of time, throwing them into my food processor here. Down a little bit. Let me tilt my screen. Oh, wait. Sorry, let me flip my products for a second so you can see the right thing. I truly envy the Food Network people who have a camera crew that is there at the ready to help make sure you can see everything. So it really helps if you have a big food processor. You want to have the metal blade that's in there because it's going to help chop up these dates, which are a little stiffer in texture. Then what we're using besides the dates, it's a pretty simple recipe, is we are using almond butter. Now, almond butter adds the sweetness and it helps bring the texture together of the dates. The great thing with almond butter, it's natural. If you're looking for whether you want to use almond butter, if you prefer using peanut butter, that's fine. You can use cashew butter. Whatever your preference is, it's still going to taste good. The nice thing when you're using like almond butter is it is a little bit thinner, so it pours well. My tip and trick for anyone who's taken classes with me before is that when you are using a natural peanut butter, because what people don't like about them sometimes is they can separate. They don't like the fact that the oil's at the top and then, you know, by the time you get to the bottom of the jar, it's all dried out. But what is helpful when you're using these natural butter products that don't have emulsifiers in it, they don't have anything else to help hold it together, is you just turn it upside down. So what happens by nature, all the oil is always going to move to the very top of the jar. So the top becomes the bottom and the bottom becomes the top, and you have a nice creamy product that will still blend well. And you're going to pour this over your dates. You can always add a little more. I believe the original recipe that I was looking at had about 1/3 of a cup. I increased it. I like 1/2 a cup. I think it adds a nice texture. It tastes much, much more creamy. So you can always add more. Then to that, just for adding a little consistency, we're adding some coconut oil. Coconut oil is solid at room temperature. It is a saturated fat. It is not something that is unsaturated. You know, it looks like this when you're using it. I like the little packets because I don't use it all the time. It's about a tablespoon a piece. When you buy it, it comes in a jar very similar to like a peanut butter jar, a little wider, and you would scoop out what you need. Because I want it to blend in nicely into my dates down here, I actually microwaved it ahead of time. And I'm just pouring that in. Now, since I used an unsalted peanut butter, I'm adding a little bit of salt. You can use sea salt, you can use table salt, use what you have available and get it in there. So that's pretty much it. We have our dates, our almond butter, our sea salt, and our coconut oil. Then we're just going to cover it and get ready to chop it up. So as you're doing this, you might find that you have to scrape it a few times and get the dates back down just so it all mixes in. And if it's a little bit piecey, like it's falling apart like now, we're using almond butter. So we're also going to add in like a little bit of that almond milk. Just a tablespoon. You don't need very much. This can help kind of bind it back together. Just do a sprinkle of your almond meal in here. If you want it a little creamier, you can always add a little bit of peanut butter or a little bit more of the almond butter also. All right. So once it's blended together, you'll find it starts to kind of ball up around the sides. When it hits this point, that's when we want to stick it in the refrigerator so that it's ready to get a little more solid. So give me 1 sec. When it is firm enough, you're going to take a little cookie scoop. And the cookie scoop, I like these. These are cookie scoops because it has the same little contraption that you'll find on that you're going to find on like an ice cream scooper. So you can scrape down the sides a little bit and it helps release it without it getting all mushed up. So you're going to take scoops of it into the freezer. You're going to be able to scoop them out, and what they'll look like is this. You kind of scoop them into little balls and they'll hold your texture. Any bonbon, you want to have that rounded top and the flat bottom because that is how it's going to set really nicely onto your plate. So in front of me, you can probably hear, you're like, what is going on? Because I hear a bunch of boiling. I just have a double boiler here and I'm doing some chocolate. We're kind of melting our chocolate down because this is what is going to make these little, salted caramel balls into an actual bonbon. So it doesn't take too long, total time. I know someone printed recipe says 5 to 10 minutes. It just matters how long, as far as blending, throw it in the freezer. It could be 5 minutes, you scoop it out, then it's all ready to be set and thrown into your chocolate. It doesn't take too long. It's not a time intensive one. And the great thing with any of these where you can make them ahead is that you can actually keep it in your freezer or your fridge and give it, usually in the refrigerator, the freezer, it's going to last for a couple weeks. In your fridge, you'll be able to have it in there for about a week or so, just as long as it doesn't dry out. Let me shift this back a little bit. Sorry, give me 1 moment. If anyone has questions, just because I am working with multiple devices here, please, please, please feel free to just say it out loud, because I don't have anyone here who can read them to me. So if I'm looking down and I'm not seeing it, I'm not trying to ignore you by any means. I apologize. All right, so once your chocolate's done, now as far as picking chocolate, there are health benefits to chocolate. It's just a matter of picking the right kind of chocolate. Chocolate comes from a bean. It's a cocoa bean. This is not new information to most of us. But when you're making actual chocolate, like candy bars and different desserts, what makes it not so healthy, essentially, is that we're putting a lot of milk fats in it, a lot of sugar to turn it into the we're all used to eating. So you want to look for things like any sort of dark chocolate. This one I got at Trader Joe's. It's a premium dark chocolate. Dark chocolate can range anywhere from like 50% cocoa up to 90%. The higher the percentage of the cocoa, the more bitter it's going to be. So you kind of go with what your taste is. Dark chocolate, the more milk, the less milk solids, the more cocoa that's in it, the more antioxidants that you have. Now, what I used in the double boiler to make it a little bit easier and to melt quicker, this is 53% cocoa. This is Toll House because it's in chip form. but I've also did bonbons at home. This is just a solid chocolate bar that you break off the pieces and you can melt just as easily in the double boiler. Or if you don't have a double boiler, you can do it in the microwave. Just make sure you're doing it in short amounts of time so that you're not having it bubble up and have hot spots and end up kind of spraying all over the inside of your microwave. So to make these look good, now we have our two options. We have our nice cocoa here. It's ready to go. You're going to take, set this over here. You're going to take your little bonbon. You can set it in here. Obviously, it's going to be hot. So the best thing, just kind of use a spoon to spread the chocolate over the top. I'm going to roll it in here a little bit. Kind of let it drip off and then set it back on your plate. It doesn't take long to set up. You know, once you're done and you get all of them covered, you're just going to set them back into the refrigerator or freezer, however you like it to firm. Remember I said we were saving the macaroons to dip into our chocolate because we knew we were going to have this step coming up also. And I'll use my spoon to pull it out. We just really want it on the macaroon on the bottom. So kind of pull it out so it's going to have a nice little consistency. I'll set it back on the plate. So one item that might pop up onto your recipe that you haven't seen before. So imagine we have all of our unchocolated ones. Here's our chocolate bonbon. We want to finish it. You want to do just a little hit of chocolate or a little bit of salt to bring out that flavor. If you prefer everything staying low salt, you don't have to add it. It's all based on taste. What I recommended you use, this is any sort of, look at this, a sea salt flake. This is Malden. I got this online at Amazon, but it's a nicer, lighter flake. The texture is a little bit smaller than a crystal. They're long and flat, but you can kind of sprinkle it on top and it gets a little hit of flavor without having too much of a strong salt. And here is the finished product. You'll see they've stayed, I pulled them right out of the refrigerator. When I've had people, now I've used family members, coworkers trying this, most people upon tasting it could not tell the difference. And they were like, okay, taste the chocolate, I taste the salt, but what's that inside flavor? It tastes, and no one ever guessed that it is dates and that it is also almond butter. So you get a nice caramely flavor without having something that seems too much like a healthier option. It actually does have a great flavor like bonbons. So that is the one that I think is definitely worth making. It's delicious. I think you'll all like it. The last thing I wanted to make was something a little savory because not everyone's into sweets. You know, some of us like to have something that's a little bit different. This is where we're going to do some spiced nuts. Now, spiced nuts are great because they're so versatile. You could pretty much take pecans, walnuts, almonds, whatever nut you like, do a mix of them if you prefer. I got a big bag of walnuts. They're nice, they're easy, high in antioxidants, good omega-3s, so they're great healthy fats. It's something that's, you know, I bought them raw, so they're plain, there's no salt. You don't want to get them already seasoned. You really want to get a raw nut so that you can add what you want to it. So go down into your pan. Oh, sorry, wrong way. And to use it, you're either going to use regular olive oil or I have canola oil. You know, the light extra virgin olive oil, that degrades easier. It is not meant for high temperatures. Since you're doing it on a stove top, your temps aren't going to be quite as high. But if you're doing it in the oven, you know, that option, and it's a great option. If you want a little bit slower amount of time, give it time to mix together. The same thing will apply. You're using all the same ingredients. You're just going to set your oven to 325 degrees. Once it's preheated, you're going to take your oil, your regular olive oil or your canola oil. You're going to put it onto your nuts, about 2 cups of nuts. Now it's nuts. You don't have to be rigorous with the measuring. I'm just going to pour them in. kind of cover the bottom. All right, then we're gonna grab our spoon. We want to get this a little bit warm. You're going to make sure you're moving the nuts around and covering them with the oil. And this is the fun part. So this is the recipe I did not send you. The one that I'm going to send, it has a variety of spices. So if you have a more simple palate, you don't like things too spicy, you don't want to deal with a lot, you could simply do the oil, a little bit of salt, and some rosemary. The recipe I'm sending you is a whole bunch more than that. Just to list off the ingredients, you get an idea. We have cumin, paprika, curry powder, salt, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, turmeric, ginger, and cinnamon. So it's a whole lot of different flavors. And you can adjust as you like. I took all those amounts, and there's amounts listed in there, and I mix it in. Some things I like more than other. I like spicy, so I added a little bit more curry, and I'm not as much into the savor of that, so I cut back on the cinnamon. Once it's mixed in here, all you have to do is sprinkle it over your nuts. And the whole amount that you have in here, you're gonna dump onto it. If you don't want it that seasoned, you could always do half of it. This is the one that gives you a lot more flexibility because we're cooking, we're not baking on this one. So you don't have to worry about consistencies and textures and things not working out. It's really just bringing the flavor together. When you're toasting it this way, you're gonna do it for about, let's see, we wanna do about 1 to 2 minutes in the nice warm pan. If it's in the oven, about 15 to 20 minutes, and you're gonna roast it in there. Great thing with these is they're not gonna, they're gonna stay shelf stable. Once it's done and they're roasted, you're just gonna cool them off on a cookie sheet and make sure that they're nice and cool and ready to enjoy. So I like this recipe because we've talked a lot in previous classes about anti-inflammatory foods and having good antioxidants. And this one has the ginger, it has the turmeric in it, which are two polyphenol powerhouses, also garlic. There's so many good things that we can get out of our spices that can make the foods healthier for us. Part of the reason that they used so many spices years ago, I mean, it was great for preserving food when you didn't have refrigeration everywhere. And it would also, because it was an antioxidant, it was breaking things down and preventing the food from spoiling as quickly. So when we can get more of those good natural antioxidants into our diet versus worrying about getting a bunch of different types of pills and concoctions that are keeping us healthier, it's going to be a better choice because we are going to absorb all of this much better than we would anything in capsule form. That's kind of, I'm going to click on your chats right now in case I missed anything. All right, so let's go back. Like I said, so I hope you guys can hear me. When you're refrigerating the bonbons, since that's something that you want to make sure that it gets stiff enough that you can scoop it, you're gonna do anywhere from about 5 to 10 minutes. I, at home, threw mine into the freezer because it was a lot faster. I just scooped them out onto my prepared cookie sheet with parchment paper, threw it in there, and it got stiff pretty quickly. And then I very quickly could throw them into the melted chocolate and then right back in the freezer. Once everything was firm after about another 5-10 minutes, then I could throw it into a storage container. The non-fat dry milk. The great thing about that product is you could find it anywhere. There's nothing special to it. If you go to any grocery store, and especially any big grocery store, if you're going to a Jewel, a Mariano's, a Tony's, it's going to be in the same aisle as all your baking goods. So the non-fat dry milk is going to be where you find your seasonings, your flours. They'll usually just have one brand, might be Carnation, this brand. This is just Kroger's, so obviously I got that one at at Mariano's, but it's an inexpensive product and it's easy to use in different foods. Like I said, great for adding to a smoothie if you have a lot of frozen fruits and you want to do more smoothies in the winter and you don't really want to buy a protein powder that has a ton of extra stabilizers and chemicals in it. You could throw a couple scoops in there and you're going to up your protein, and it does not add a strong flavor like most protein powders, which have vanilla or chocolate or something else added into it. So it is a great option. So my nuts are done. So all we do, on here real quick, you're just going to throw it onto a cookie sheet. You can smell they have a nice fragrance. Too much longer, I'm going to burn them all, but it's kind of a nice so that you can appeal to both people's sweet tooth and savory tooth. So if you ever see anything in a recipe like that, especially when it's not, based on a baked item that you need so much dry to so much wet for it to work, feel free to omit things and make sure that it is, fitting to your taste. All right. So those are all the foods that I had to prepare for you guys today. Do I have any questions from anyone who wants to either chat it or ask live while we're on YouTube? Everyone's quiet?
Becky?
Yes.
I have a question, and I missed what you were saying. When you mix the dry milk with the evaporated, that's a replacement for what?
We are using that to replace sweetened condensed milk.
Okay.
I remember growing up, we always had sweetened condensed milk and Karo syrup. Those were sort of the staples of a lot of holiday cooking because you had the Karo syrup for the sweetness and you had the sweetened condensed milk to give the creaminess, but it also had sweetness. So I will send you the recipe. So that's the one with the 1 can of the evaporated milk, 1 cup of the dry milk. Then you're going to add cornstarch. Some recipes will list xanthan gum. All it is a thickener. So you could use cornstarch. I've seen there's recipes for using chia seeds in order to use it as a thickener. So whatever you like, just to make it that creamier, not so watery, because we're using a non-fat milk, it's going to be a little bit more watery. If we're adding the cornstarch, we can get that same creamy texture. And then you will choose what you want your sweetener to be, whether you're going to use like erythritol, which is pretty 1-to-1 in the powdered version to what table sugar would taste like, or if you wanted to try doing anything that's liquid like agave nectar or playing with even honey, you could throw things in there. I would just play with the amount of cornstarch so you get that nice creamy texture. Whenever you're adding more liquids, you might have to adjust it and add a little bit more so that you get that. But it's nice if you have like traditional recipes that you've always used. Like I made this weekend key lime pie, and that used sweetened condensed milk, and I used that alternative with the erythritol, and that's when I found that it was better if I warmed all of that ahead of time, because it helped the powders all blend into the milk a little better than just mixing it up and then putting it in, and then you don't get as much of the grittiness that you would get with just putting them
together. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Easy enough. There are so many different ways to play with sweetened condensed milk. I saw ones that had dates. They basically simmered dates, cut them up, simmered it into coconut milk. Then you use like a fine mesh sieve like this. You would strain out your dates, and then you had a sweetened, coconut milk that you could stiffen up a little bit with the cornstarch. 1-to-1, exchange, you could get coconut cream in a can, which is something that would be a natural way rather than the sweetened condensed milk. But what the problem is with the coconut cream is it's the exact same amount of fat as you're finding in the sweetened condensed milk. You're getting, a lot of saturated fat because coconuts do have saturated fat. So if you're using a non-fat milk first and, using a starch to thicken it a little bit, you can cut down the amount of fat. So if you're a little bit more sensitive to either calories or being careful about saturated fat and cholesterol, those would be great ways to modify it so that it could be a healthier thing that you don't feel like you're indulging the whole, holiday season in extras. Anyone else have questions?
Becky, if you have somebody that's allergic to milk, to dairy, can you just use just the coconut milk? And
Yes.
or how could you substitute that?
So if you were gonna do that, then I would get the light coconut milk and you could just thicken it up a little bit. I mean, coconut milk can be a little thicker, so you can try, and that's where I saw there's different ways of using, as long as you're simmering it and getting more of the liquid out, you might use a couple cans of the light coconut milk and help, evaporate it down and add whatever you want to use for sweetness, whether you want to do the dates or you want to do the erythritol, and then thicken it up with a little bit of cornstarch, then you can avoid adding the non-fat dry milk to it. So that would be fine if you have some sensitivities. Anyone else? Good questions.
Do you have more recipes like this?
I have lots of different recipes. What are the recipes are you looking for? My favorite thing to do, because
Like a cookbook from you.
a cookbook. I have to say, I love hunting around and playing with stuff and other people's recipes. Baking is such a finite thing that I really do refer to several different recipes before I adjust it, because it's such a chemical process of making sure things are going to set. Sometimes you need like the leavening of having like whipped egg whites. So you really have to be careful as you're playing with like cookies or anything that's going to bake. You got a lot more free will when it comes to cooking, because you can add a spice, you can take it out. It's just, you can make a sauce a little creamy or not. I think it gives a lot more freedom to people who are not as comfortable or versed in all the baking pieces. But some of my favorite, if you're looking for a great one that had the salted caramel bonbons, and it's also on the recipe I'm sending you. So this is the Good Clean Food, and it's by Lily Coonan. So she's got a ton of just healthy recipes, from sweets to some soups to smoothies. So I love looking at different things that dietitians are putting out and vegan or vegetarian chefs, because they find great creative ways of taking out dairy, or taking out any sort of like meats and using alternatives to it that a lot of us may not be as comfortable with. So I like to reference those, plus just finding ways to use natural food to make things that taste good, versus feeling like we always have to use sugar and a lot of salt and a lot of fat in order to get that savoriness and sweetness that we've grown accustomed to over the years. And it doesn't have to be that way. I know for a lot of you who've been eating healthy for a long time, you find that when you take something out and your palate adjusts over time. It's not like you feel like you're living a life of having to miss out on stuff because you don't eat cookies or you're not eating French fries every day. It's really, you kind of have those overly sweet, overly salty, overly fatty foods, and you think, I'm missing out on the flavor of what the actual food is. I'm just tasting all the extra add-ons in order to prepare it, which is causing me to probably eat more than I need, because I'm really just looking for salt, fat, and sugar. I think the more we play with recipes where we can use actual fruits and vegetables and whole grains, we can recognize the good flavor of real food versus all the extra add-ons. Anyone else? Let's see. Can you send a few more recipes of your favorites? I'm happy to look through and give you guys some more recipes. I'll send you guys the 3 that we have today, because I can do that right away, but I'm happy to send some other good, yummy recipes that I've tried that I've liked. And, I think the best part of it, especially when you're approaching new food, is try to look at it as a fun experiment. If you find baking something is irritating and frustrating, it's not the right task for you, because in the end, you should enjoy it. It should be a time of being able to relax and not only address what I should put into my body, but also mental health. I love to turn on music while I'm cooking. Sometimes my son will pitch in and help me. My daughter never. My 9-year-old daughter has no interest in baking with me, but my son will cook with me. So it can be a nice time to connect and just sort of disconnect from all the other things in the world, and be able to, make something nice for your family and try it. Sometimes they're failures. Trust me, I had a couple things like the honey-based coconut macaroons that I was like, I'm not really going to do that. I don't like it. It wasn't my favorite flavor, but if I hadn't played with the recipe a couple times, then I wouldn't have been able to tell you that some things worked a little bit better than others, and it's okay to have to throw something out. So I had the question, where did I get the coconut oil packets. And again, I'm going to seem like I should be getting some advertising from them. This is Trader Joe's. I like getting a lot of stuff at Trader Joe's. There's certain things, and I'll tell you my pitch for them. If you want to get in and out and not have to look through aisles and aisles of tons of products, I like when you have a store that's a little bit smaller, because there's only a couple types of coconut oil. You know, they're going to have different cereals. They'll have a variety of olive oils, canola oils. They'll have more to choose from than some other products, but it's not overwhelming. And I like that because it makes my shopping trip a lot quicker. I like to sit and look at labels and do all that, but I know for a lot of us, especially this day and age, when we're kind of limiting contact with other people, when you can get in and out and be done and you're not searching around trying to find someone to help you and figure out where the product is, it's a lot better. The same thing could be said when I'm doing any sort of almond butter, cashew butter, anything that's not peanut butter. I went to Tony's, and the same thing would be true if I went to Mariano's. When I was looking for almond butter there, this size container was anywhere from $12 to like $15. And there was maybe two choices. Like Justin's is a big brand that's out there. It's organic, it's natural, but usually that's the market price. It's for a regular size container, about $12 to $15. When I went to Trader Joe's, they have a couple different, from salted to unsalted, all their own brands, but I spent $6.99 for each one of these. So I'm paying half price for it. So I try to find places, and I know if I'm going to get nuts that are inexpensive, usually I'll go to Trader Joe's. Same idea as like getting the almond butters, is that it can be a little bit cheaper, and I don't want to spend a ton of extra money in order to make anything. So I'd say go get the non-fat dry milk powder rather than paying for some specialty item. You can always find like cheaper substitutes that are going to be just as nutritious and not like break the bank. All right. Any other questions, guys? Or ladies, I should say, and what we have here? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It was great doing this. We're going to be from the Cancer Survivorship Center. We're going to be doing more like monthly cooking demos in January. I think it's going to be the third Monday. We'll get the date sent out to you. But we are doing New Year, New Year, you. So we're talking about like different detox smoothies and foods that you can eat that are naturally healthy for you. So I'm so glad that you could be here. We'll kind of work out the bumps, trying to get this thing working like a real kitchen in here. And I appreciate you guys for all your great comments, for your, constructive criticism. Let us know how we can make things better. And if you missed anything, feel free, go on YouTube, you can see it, or you can always email me and let me know what you want to know. But I hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks for being here. And I hope you have a happy holiday. Bye.
Thank you so much.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Especially with the
Thank you.
circumstances.
Thank you.
Happy holiday.
Happy
Merry
holidays.
Thank